Dapol have excelled and gone above and beyond, and all I can say is that the wait has very much been worth it. Hi there everyone, welcome back to another video here with me, Jennifer Kirk. It's great to see you again, I hope you are well. And today we've got a box opening and review of a new product that's come through recently from Dapol. So a big thank you to Dapol for sending one of these over for review. And also today's video is sponsored by Train-O-Matic, makers of DCC decoders and accessories. Designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts. These just work straight out of the box. But without further ado, come with me and I'll show you the ins and outs of this really stunning locomotive. So here we have it. This is the new Class 29 from Dapol. They've also brought out a Class 21. Now these were announced an awfully long time ago, and in some respects it could be a dangerous game to announce something and wait year after year after year before it's ready for release. But I think Dapol have actually done a blinder with this. They have actually not only delivered, but they have delivered to an exceptional standard from what I've seen so far. On the box, we've got a catalogue number 4D014-001, and this is the Class 29 in BR two-tone green as number D6114 with the head code box and small yellow panel. Now they've brought out the Class 29 in the two-tone green with the full front yellow panel, and they've also brought it out in BR blue. Now the Class 21, which is similar but not exactly the same for reasons that I'll come to in a minute, they've brought that out in the plain green livery but with an assortment of no front warning panels, half front warning panels and full front warning panels. And it'll be interesting to see whether in the follow-up production runs the single sole BR blue Class 21 will be making an appearance. But actually I'm really glad that Dapol have sent over the Class 29 because in some respects I think that this is the prettier of the two with the livery options available. In the box we've got an awful lot of information, and actually some of this is really useful, going on about what the different functions are, DCC decoder compatibilities, and also very handily it gives you some options for being able to reprogram. If you have a DCC controller such as the one that I have by GaugeMaster, where the F2 function doesn't natively latch because it's intended for a whistle function with sound decoders, it actually tells you how to reprogram that, which is actually really helpful. We've also got the typical no quibble warranty from Dapol as well, which we've come to expect from the full range of products that have been offered. Now here we get our first look at the locomotive in the box, and actually this as well has caught my eye, that rather than having a rather flimsy little plastic bag for some of the extra detail and accessories, this has come in a little plastic clip case, which makes it really easy to keep unused bits and pieces out of the way. And in all honesty, this just is a prelude to the quality that we're going to see with this model, and the whole package that is here just exudes that quality that shows that Dapol have really put a lot of thought into this. I'm going to slide it out, and this comes very well protected, not just the outer slip case and the surround, but it's got clip down sides as well, making this about the most protected model that I've seen in transit. And what that means is when it comes to the end user, it is in perfect condition after its travels from the factory. And first up, this two-tone green livery really does suit this locomotive. You can see here it's come in this, what was actually a very characteristic livery for what was otherwise a somewhat unsuccessful class in real life. Now the Class 29 was a re-engineered version of the Class 21. The Class 21 wasn't massively successful with its MAN engines built under licence by the North British Company, and so some of the locomotives were sent off to Davy Paxman in Colchester and re-engined with the Paxman Ventura engine, which did actually ultimately, after a few tweaks and some teething problems were sorted out, dramatically improve the reliability of these locomotives. However, as British Rail was contracting and the work that these were built for started to dry up, they found themselves as a fairly small non-standard class and became early victims of withdrawal. Sadly, none of these survived through to preservation, although the outwardly fairly similar Class 21 did manage to survive into the early 1980s, but was a casualty at Dye Woodham's yard and never managed to pass on to be saved. I'm actually really happy that Dapol have sent over the two-tone green version, because even though I'm a BR Blue fanatic, I really do think that this livery option suits the class so much better. So well played, Dapol. But even though saying that, given what I've seen of this locomotive thus far, I think that a BR Blue version is probably on the cards for something that I want to pick up in due course. They've really captured the look of this rather strange looking prototype very well. They've got the characteristic body sides that kind of has this slight tumble home, which is hidden in some respects by the demarcation white line between the dark green and this lime green, but it's very characteristic of the North British Locomotive Company's offerings. They built the Class 22, the Class 21, and this, the Class 29, is very much unmistakably one of their offerings. Whereas they'd been a very successful builder of steam locomotives, diesel locomotives kind of had them foxed a little bit, and they proved to be the ultimate downfall of the company, which was probably struggling anyway. The nickname for these locomotives was Old Sad Eyes, and when you look at the end there, you can really see that Dapol have captured that really quite sad-looking front face of this locomotive well. We've already had the Class 22 to enjoy for quite some time, and that has built a reputation as being a reliable runner and a really good model of the prototype. When I've compared this Class 29 to the Dapol Class 22, even though they share a common locomotive builder, all of the different aspects of both classes have been captured really well. This is not a pseudo Class 22 dressed up to pass it off as a Class 29. This is fully tooled from scratch, which is probably one of the reasons that we've had to wait some time since the Class 22 hit the retailers' shelves. This locomotive is slightly longer, just like the real prototype. It does also share those spoked wheels that were very characteristic of North British products, and I suppose they were in part an effort to keep weight down, because these were quite overweight locomotives. North British locomotives really did build things substantially, so these were somewhat overweight for what they were intended to do. But actually, in model form, the extra weight that Dapol have managed to squeeze in here means that it is a super reliable runner. It's got their now trademark Super Creep motor, and what that means is that this is incredibly sure-footed. It runs down to an absolute crawl, and it runs smoothly at that. There's no juddering or notching that I could ascertain, and actually the pulling power is second to none. I had it running round Weir Yard, and it just performed faultlessly out of the box without even needing running in. When it comes to the rest of the look of this locomotive, they've captured the depth and detail in these bogie frames really well. As I alluded to before, the spoked wheels are there just as they should be, and all of this detail really is quite exquisite. One thing that doesn't quite match up is that the brake blocks don't match up with the wheel treads. Though actually, for anybody who wants to convert to P4 or EM, that's actually a little bit of a boon, because it means you don't need major surgery if you want to pull the axles out to cater for the prototypical scales. Lubrication can be made very readily to the gear train through these little holes at the base of each axle, which means that if you need to quieten a squeaking drivetrain, which actually this doesn't squeak in the slightest, but should you need to in the future, you don't have to dismantle the gear towers to do that, which is great. We can also see here there's a full set of 4 dip switches, nicely hidden in the underside of the battery box compartments, and these allow switching between different combinations of cab lights, end lights, and other such things that this model caters for. It's one of the things that's always bugged me a little bit when you get a locomotive that shows red tail lights to the rear whenever it's moving, because unless it's running as light locomotive, that isn't prototypical. So it does mean that if you're running on DC, for example, you can turn them off on the underside here, and it also means that you don't have to put up with a cab light that's permanently on. In terms of other things, well, we can see some of the other exquisite fine detail that's gone into the underside of this model. It's an area that manufacturers are really upping their game, and Dapol is no different. The couplings on these are in these NEM pockets that have a small amount of sideways play. It does mean that you can change these quite readily to alternative couplings, and there is a screw down there which allows you to remove the entire NEM pocket assembly if you don't want it. For example, if you want to add on the buffer beam detail that comes in that extra buffer beam detailing pack that I showed you earlier. The buffers on this model are fully sprung, and there's a good feeling of durability to those. They're not loose, they work as they should, and they do feel pretty stout and sturdy. The windscreens are flush fitted, and we've got this very delicately done silver surround, just like on the real things. We've also got wiper blades, again picked out in silver, and the top eyebrows of the model, as I've seen it described elsewhere, this very complex shape is realised really, really well. All in all, the front face of this locomotive, which arguably is the make or break feature of any locomotive, has been captured perfectly by Dapol. We've also got all the lamp irons factory fitted on there, really, really nicely done. Turning to the side, we can see all of the extra detail down and along here. These grills in particular are really nicely done, and we've got a kind of grill upon extra detail finish whereby you can see through and see that there's a real depth to that. It isn't just moulded on, it's actually very thoughtfully done as a multi-layer piece, and it works really well for it. The louvres on the side are really, really fine, nicely done. They're only part of the moulding, but actually they're really well realised, and this has allowed Dapol to give a very, very fine effect to all of these very distinctive body side grills. These handholds and footholds have been done really, really well as well, and Dapol have really captured the recessed look of the original. Handrails are metal and factory applied and really nicely done. The tampo printing on this is sharp and second to none. The white line across the middle has got no bleed over, no fuzziness, and is just straight and true exactly where it needs to be. The very distinctive diamond North British Locomotive builders plate is really nicely realised. With my naked eyes, I'm really struggling to read it, but I can see that the detail is sharp and crisp, and I've got every faith that under close magnification that's really going to look the part. There's a slight relief to it as well. When I run my finger over, it does feel almost like a separate etched piece. I'm not sure that it is, but Dapol have actually got that perfect effect as if it was. Underneath we've also got more plates there. I think that might be a shed plate. I'm not entirely sure. Again, it's very difficult to read some of this detail with the naked eye because it is so small. But it doesn't seem to look very fuzzy at all, and that means that we're going to see something quite nice and quite sharp going above and beyond when we look at that under close magnification. The centre doors, which would give access into the engine room as well, nicely realised, with a flush glazing. There is an ever so slight bowing around the edges of this glazing, giving an almost Coke bottle effect, but actually it's fairly minor, and I don't believe it to be a detraction. As we look further along, the British Rail Lake crest as well, it's sharp, all the colours are right and where they should be, and again, it's just what we would expect. All in all, it is a great package, and it captures the look of the prototype perfectly. To the tumble home at the bottom of the body, to this kind of two-part curve to the body side that was so characteristic of the North British classes 21, 22 and 29. When we look to the roof as well, the exquisite detail just keeps on coming. We've got this vent on here, and it's a separately applied metal piece. And if we look down through it, there's no sign of the innards of the locomotive. It doesn't look like we're looking down into nothing. There is space beyond that grille, and actually it's space that really makes the effect work. Inside, the chassis has space for a speaker underneath here, so it's very thoughtfully placed. That means that if you get either the factory sound fitted example or choose to go your own route and source your own sound chip for these, it's going to give a really good sound reproduction through this grille. In terms of other detail, the riveting, the bands between the different roof panels are really nicely done. And again, this is another area that Dapol have really captured the look of the prototype really well. It's not just an arched roof. It has actually a very complex shape with a radius that changes to the top, changes again, and then changes back again. It would be so easy to get this body shape wrong, but Dapol have excelled and gone above and beyond, and all I can say is that the wait has very much been worth it. Other detail is finished with all the relief it needs to have, and just looks so sharp and clear and just like the real thing. So I'm really pleased to see what Dapol have come up with. When I had this locomotive running, as I said before, out of the box, it just worked. And actually, that's what we really want from locomotives. We don't want to be having to mess about, having to run them in, bed them in, just to get the most out of them. Out of the box, this Dapol model really does give the best. I had it right down to an absolute crawl. There was no real sign of notching or juddering, and it showed no propensity whatsoever to stalling out. I haven't bothered putting a smart power pack in here because, quite frankly, it just doesn't need it. It runs so faultlessly without needing any of that extra expensive electrical gubbins, so I just did away with it. Even through complicated point work down to a crawl, there was no hesitation from this model. It's one of the most reliable runners that I've seen. I thought the Class 22 was good and has actually, given its reliability, passed into being one of the stalwarts of my fleet, but I think this Class 29 is actually surpassing even that. So we're up here in Weir Yard, and I'm going to show you exactly how easy it is to DCC fit this Dapol Class 29. It's actually one of the easiest locos that I've had to do this, so let's take a look. Right, the decoder that I've chosen is a Trainomatic 21-pin decoder, and I'm going to show you just how easy this is to get into. So with your fingernails, you just feel for the very bottom of the tumble home. You get your nails in there, make sure you're close to the ground, because when this drops you don't want to put a strain on the cables. Gently pull apart and let the weight of the chassis drop all that down, and then just put that to one side. You can see that the wires are a little bit short. Flathead screwdriver, and we're just going to very carefully lever up the blanking plate. Work from both ends a little bit at a time, take that out, and then we take our Trainomatic 21-pin decoder and we make sure that we get this lined up with the pins on the board, push it back down, and then the top just slides back into place. A little tap just gets that back into position, and there you are, ready to go on the programming track, program up, and away you go. So, to the scores. In terms of finish, I found that there's really not anything that I can see to fault with this. Everything's where it should be, and they've captured the look and colour of this locomotive just perfectly. The two-tone green livery just so suits it, so even as a BR Blue modeller, I'm so happy to be able to take a close look at this two-tone green. So for finish, there just isn't anything that I can fault, so I'm going to give this 10 out of 10. Then we turn to functionality. As I said before, this was a faultless runner. Straight out of the box, it didn't put a wheel wrong over any aspect of Weir Yard. Over complicated point work, over straight track, up and down gradients, it would chug along at a slow speed and it would just keep on chugging without any sign of protestation. The full-size prototype locomotives may have been notorious for just how pathetic they were in frontline service, but this model bucks that trend, and Dapol really have delivered a model that surpasses any reputation that the prototypes had. This is a model that surpasses the reputation that so many other models have. So, for functionality, I give this 10 out of 10. Ease of use. I particularly like Dapol's path where they've gone for very, very easy DCC fitting. There are no screws to hold the body on with this. It's simply a case of very gently prising out the body sides from the chassis. Make sure you're holding it over a firm surface, not too high, and then just let the chassis drop out. It did it first time, every time for me, and really, there's not a lot to fault other than you either need to grow your fingernails ever so slightly or have something very, very thin just to be able to part the body from the chassis. That said, it's only a minor gripe, so I'm going to give this a 9.9. So we turn to aesthetics, and actually it's one of the areas that I've been particularly impressed by. It could have been so easy to get this wrong. It's a complex shape, far more complex perhaps than its stature would give credit for. The body sides have some peculiar angles to them in a characteristic North British locomotive style, and the roof too is more than just one simple arc. The front faces of these locomotives as well has been captured pretty much perfectly. For me, the only thing that I could put my finger on and say wasn't quite 100% is the glazing, but it's a minor detraction just on those body side access doors, so I'm going to give this a 9.9. In terms of value for money, this locomotive can be had for around the £127 mark. There are versions available for each livery in either DC, DCC fitted, or sound fitted. And actually, in my opinion, £127, some people might say that's very expensive, but it's the ballpark figure that we've come to expect, and some manufacturers have gone way, way beyond that. So for a model of this calibre, I think this does offer very good value for money. In terms of performance, it really is the locomotive that keeps on giving, and you will find it to be a stalwart of your fleet. Therefore, for value for money, I'm going to give this a 9.8 out of 10. So overall, 49.6 out of 50. This has to be the most impressive locomotive of the year so far for me. It's really hard to try and find something that's wrong with it, and I feel like I'm splitting hairs when I do point something out. Any detractions that I have mentioned, they really are minor, but I've brought them to your attention just to make sure that we've got the full, rounded, honest opinion of this locomotive. Anybody who slates it, well, they clearly weren't looking at it properly. This, for me, so far, is the locomotive of 2020, and I'm really pleased and happy that Dapol have given me this opportunity to review it. Well, I hope that video has been informative to you. It's been great to have your company, and I've really enjoyed showing off this model to you. Don't forget to like this video and share it too. And also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. And of course, get those videos shared. Let everybody know about the stuff that we're doing here, because that's the best way we can build the audience. And also don't forget that we've got some affiliate links down below which take you to somewhere that you can get your hands on any of the models that have been touched upon in today's video. And just remember that if you buy anything through the affiliate links, it does not cost you any extra, but it does help out the channel in a big, big way. But anyway, it's been great to have your company, and until next time, you take really good care of yourself, and I hope to see you again. Bye for now. Today's video is sponsored by Trainomatic, makers of DCC decoders designed to be fully compatible with every manufacturer's locomotive. Visit train-o-matic.com to browse the full range and see what they've got suitable for you. I'd like to send out a huge thanks to everybody who supports me on Patreon, but a special thanks go out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, oorail.co.uk, Tepic, Michael Lockie, and Helen Sink. Thank you. Without you guys, I couldn't do this.